This is episode 105 of The Place of Sound, and I'm your host, Katerina Kalinowska. In our last episode, we visited the Ottawa Urbanism Book Club with Strong Towns Ottawa, where the group was discussing Ottawology. The author wasn't able to be there that evening, so I wanted to follow up with her and bring her voice into the conversation. In this episode, I'm joined by Tonya Davidson, Associate Professor of Sociology at Carleton University. We talk about what it means to look at Ottawa through a sociological lens, how her teaching connects to the book, and what she hopes people notice differently about the city after reading it. Hello, Tonya.
Hi.
Could you please introduce yourself for the listeners?
Sure. My name's Tonya Davidson. I'm an Associate Professor of Sociology here at Carleton University.
That's perfect. I also wanted to know what originally drew you to the sociology field as a field of study and as a way of thinking.
Oh, geez. Well, that is, like a lot of things are really sort of accidents that just get solidified over time. So I started I did my undergraduate degree in anthropology, also at Carleton. And then I switched into sociology because I was interested in cultural studies more specifically. And the program I was interested in at University of Victoria, sociology was one of the feeder sort of disciplines. So I became a sociologist after that.
I see. Mm-hmm. What do you remember the most about your studies in sociology?
Oh, I will give like a better origin story of my disciplinary choice is when I was in high school, I really wanted to be a museum curator. I love museums so much. And I worked at the Children's Museum in London, Ontario. And my boss there, when I said, how do I get your job? I like it. And she said, you should study art history or anthropology. And I hadn't heard of anthropology. I asked my sister what that was. She's a few years older than me and was already in university. And she described it and it sounded, good. So that's how I picked. But then the jump from anthropology to sociology is not a big one. It's just like a little tiny step.
I see. You teach a couple of introductory sociology courses, right? And one of them is also the sociology of Ottawa. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to ask you more about that one. What do you most want students to take from their first exposure to sociology and to those courses?
Okay, so those are very different courses. The introduction to sociology is a large 400 student class. It's a huge survey course, and I love teaching it because I get to teach students from across the university, like from the arts and social sciences, but also engineering and really computer science. And I really strongly think that everybody should have a dose of sociology in their undergraduate education. So I feel very committed to that as a big part of my career. The Sociology of Ottawa course, that one I haven't taught for a few years. That one just depends on sort of, staffing in the department. And that was a first-year seminar. And first-year seminars are fabulous because they are very small classes, full-year courses for first-year students. So it's about 20 to 30 students with me all year. And in that context, you can do a lot. You can have larger projects because you have more time. And in this Sociology of Ottawa first year seminar, we went on a lot of field trips. We also, when I taught urban sociology, we also went on. I'm a huge fan of field trips. Pedagogically, it's great for like cohort building for a class. You can have things happen when you're out in the city that are sort of memorable, that bring you together, and you can go back to them when you're trying to discuss something. So that is a real value of both of those classes.
I see. I didn't know that those first year seminars happened. It's my first time hearing about them.
Well, it's a big thing in the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences. So in a different faculty, I'm not sure, but they are one of our shining elements of our programs for sure.
So What was that seminar, Sociology of Ottawa, really about for you? You said field trips, but was there anything else?
Yeah, so I'll tell you, my research until very recently, my dissertation research, like the first decade of my intellectual life, was all focused on monuments in Ottawa. So I'm a sort of an urban sociologist, and I'm a sociologist of memory. So that has been my interest for a long time. So I had a book that came out in 2024 called Tours Inside the Snow Globe, and it is all about a few monuments. It's not about all the monuments, but it's about the social life of a few monuments in the city. So I'm looking at monuments from a sociological rather than from a historic perspective. And so that was my big interest for a long time. And then after that, that was done. That book was done, and I needed to shift gears a little bit. And a lot of people thought I would maybe start to be interested in maybe monuments in another city or something akin to monuments, some other type of public art. But really my interest that whole time, it turns out, was Ottawa. It was like the monuments I was really interested, but I was even more interested in everything else about Ottawa. So that's when the Sociology of Ottawa course, preparing it, really allowed me to start digging into the research that's already existing on the sociology of transit in Ottawa, the sociology of crime in Ottawa, the sociology of health in Ottawa, all of these things that exist. I was just really like bringing them to the surface for students to inform this course.
I see. No, I understand. As I'm not from Ottawa, I'm from Ukraine, and being away from the city I was born in and spent basically all my life in, it really dawns in me how much I didn't know about the city and how much I still don't know and how much I want to still learn about it too. So I totally understand. So my next question is, what tends to surprise students the most when they start studying Ottawa sociologically?
Well, a lot of things surprise students. I don't know, it would be a really good question to ask students. A lot of students in this class live in residence, they're first-year students, so they have not been to many parts of the city or gone downtown. I remember one class, we were meeting under Mama, the spider sculpture by the art gallery. And one student was living on campus, didn't trust the transit system, and he walked and he left 2 hours early. So just all of these, just sort of for the first year students navigating the city, especially if they're not from here, I think they learn a lot. I did this one scavenger hunt that was they could choose. They had to go to one of the city's waterfalls. And I had a bunch of different questions they had to figure out. And one of the students went to Hogsback, which is not far from here, but a lot of students living in campus never go to the Arboretum or never go to Hogsback. And she told me how she had subsequently taken so many of her friends from her res floor to Hogsback. So I'm like, okay, so much surprises students because you just have limited life experience and experience navigating the city. One of the things I also would say is that not just among students, but among people broadly, there are parts of the city that are frequently disparaged in the news and in public perception as being unsavory, dangerous, and these types of things. And I find it important to address those understandings and visit some places like Dundonald Park. We walked through Dundonald Park on a sort of walk of third places in the city. And this is a place that is right across from the beer store. So a lot of people think of it as this just only a place where people are engaging in antisocial behaviors. But that's not true. And you can see that if you hang out there for any amount of time, that but people do drink alcohol and do sorts of things. And also children play in the playground and people are reading their newspapers. So I think it's also useful for challenging these sort of misconceptions of parts of the city that we have.
What do you think is the purpose of those misconceptions in media about those places?
Oh, well, it's very... obvious, and fine colleagues in criminology could speak better to this, right? But when you disparage a group of people and behaviors, it makes it much easier to vote for larger police budgets and against safe injection sites and these types of things. And also it makes the sort of logic of suburban governance much more persuasive for governing a whole city. And so much, and I talk about this in a chapter on suburbanism, so much of the logic of suburbanism is sort of rooted in an insularity and a fear of the other broadly. So and this is not to say this is about suburban people, but the design of suburbs is about private family dwellings with privatized playgrounds, which are backyards, right? Privatized transit systems, which are cars. And there's this garrison mentality. I don't know if that's the right term. This mentality of hunkering down, of making your own little security systems, right? And so it becomes this loop where you live in this very insular, only in your little family or small social group surrounding, don't see difference, and then that sort of validates it. So then when you go and interact with other people that are even remotely engaging in different behaviors or look different, it's seen as threatening. So that's where I think that comes from.
Yeah, and you would think that those people who move out of the city, they are in the community, basically. They have their own community, but they don't engage with it as much because of how privatized everything is, and because those boxes are kind of made for them already. Yeah. Like one of the things I talk about in the chapter on transit is that something that gets sort of undiscussed, like public transit is so necessary. It's so important for thinking about sustainability for the environment. It's also an issue that is hugely gendered because of how class is gendered. It's hugely racialized because of, again, how class is racialized. But also there's this civility aspect of it, right? Public transit is such an important place where people are constantly socialized into how to engage civilly with people they do not know. And this is lost when we're only in our own little cars and are engaging in road rage and with behind the, security of our 1,000-pound vehicle, etc. Yeah, that's right. Yes, last question on the course and the studies. How do classroom conversations shape your own thinking about the city?
Oh, that's a great question. One of the things I'll say is I taught for many years in the lifelong learning program at Carleton. It's sadly been discontinued, and it's a real shame because it was a great source of joy for me and for the students. And in that course, the students were mostly retired. It used to be the Learning Retirement Program. And they had so much life experience, and they told me such great stories about the old department stores from the 70s and the amazing malt milk at the bottom of Freeman's and things like that. So I literally was taking notes in that class. I'm like, tell me more about that. So that's always was great. But also my first year classes as well, students always have great insights and examples that shape me. And I talk about the students in the acknowledgements of the book because it is very influential.
I see. Autovology. We've been talking about it a bit already, but how would you describe the book to someone who hasn't encountered it yet?
I would say that it is a sociological introduction take on Ottawa. I would definitely stress that it is sociology plus Ottawa. So there's a lot of history in it. It's very rooted in histories of Ottawa as well. But it's really offering sociological analyses of urban phenomenon that we find in other cities as well, but it's focused on what those look like in Ottawa.
I see. What questions were you trying to answer through the book?
Well, the questions, I didn't have big guiding questions for each chapter. The biggest question for me was, what have sociologists already said about Ottawa? How have they already been making sense of Ottawa? Because this book is not based on my original fieldwork or original, data collection. I'm 100% drawing on what was existing already. So I always say that so many people have been autoologists without recognizing it. So one thing I start in the book that Carleton's Department of Sociology is the second oldest sociology department in the country. It was established by John Porter, who wrote The Vertical Mosaic in the 1960s, which was the first comprehensive sociology of Canadian society.
Oh, wow.
So the sociology department at Carleton has a great sort of history and legacy of creating great sociological sense of Canada. And it's been training generations of sociologists for the last 50 years, and it's been doing that in Ottawa. So many graduate students became sociologists here. And what did they study? They often studied aspects of Ottawa life. The point is, the long story short is, there's so much great sociological research on Ottawa, and I was really putting it together.
So how did you decide what to include and what to not in the book when you were writing it?
That was very difficult, and my editor decided for me a lot. I wrote a lot more. I have many chapters that were cut, so it's very devastating for me. But I shouldn't talk about I really wanted to talk. So the basic three areas are home, work, and other, I guess. So I have, but there's some real big gaps that I have written about and thought about a lot. But I wanted, so there are two big chapters on home that include discussions of gentrification and housing and rooming houses and bunk houses, student housing, and then another chapter on suburbia and all of that, and suburbia and the paving over of wetlands and transit, automobility, and the Instant Pot and Canada and things. And then I have two big chapters on work. One's on work broadly and one's on the civil service. And then in the third category include things like trees, which is a lot of the history of the region, but also thinking about trees and neighborhood vitality, and libraries, markets and malls. Good night, the night chapter, a lot on leisure spaces. I guess I kind of have four categories, because then the fourth one is more broad sort of infrastructure, like transit and security. Yeah. So that's what I include. I start with a chapter called Settler Colonial Capital that talks about land dispossession and Indigenous resistance and resurgence, and also about immigration to what's become Ottawa over the last 200 years.
Was there anything that surprised you while working on the book? Like maybe some sudden revelations about Ottawa or anything interesting that you found?
Well, I think I was just really nourished by the possibility of finding anything interesting, because Ottawa has this real reputation for being boring, and that always, and one of the sort of tenets of sociology is to make the familiar strange. That's one of our big catchphrases. It comes from this sociologist from the 1960s named Peter Berger. And he said, this is what sociologists should do. They should take those things we take for granted as familiar, as just commonplace, and ask questions about it and look at it, turn it around in your hands, look at it in a different way, so it becomes strange. Mm-hmm. And so this, what I love to do in Ottawa is take this taken for granted thing, it's just a boring civil service city, and be no, it actually has all of the aspects of what urban life have. You put over a million people together over 200 years, there's going to be all sorts of interesting things. So there were little surprises all the time. Nothing that was earth-shattering so much. But I'll give you one example that might be shocking to you, is that in the 1980s, Ottawa used to have a world-class public transit system. Yeah, I know. People studied Ottawa from all around. So how did they do it?
Jaw drop.
I know, right? It was, we had a bus rapid transit system that began late 1970s. And it lasted until the LRT was started. And so we have these two dedicated downtown streets that were one-way streets, Slater and Albert, and people could get from Canada downtown like really quickly. I don't know, 25 minutes. And it was a great success. And one of the reasons, so that might be already shocking for some of your listeners, that we used to be at the forefront of public transit. But what was shocking is that one of the reasons why it became a success so quickly was because just as it was rolling out, the federal government stopped giving its employees free parking. So there was a bit of a push-pull situation. So everybody jumped on the bus. But I don't think that is a lesson, because they just made parking more difficult for students at Carleton. That doesn't solve actually the transit situation if you don't have, buses or trains to jump on.
I see. What do you think people miss when they see Ottawa only through some sort of lens?
Well, one thing, I'll answer this question tangentially, because in the process of, I started this book in 2020. I was on sabbatical and also lockdown, like everyone. So I turned to my lecture material from my previous years, and I began this process. And I'm writing along until 2022, Convoy. Now, that is another big sound story for your listeners. Like, that was a big sound. I mean, I know scholars have done work on the soundscapes of the convoy and the meanings there. But one of the things that really struck the nerves of so many Ottawans at that moment was we saw in full force this overwhelming perception of the city as only being the federal government, right? So this is something that's like, it's never been, it's understood. People in Ottawa understand when you go outside of Ottawa that Ottawa is just used as a stand-in for the federal government. You hear it on the news, like, Ottawa's decided to cut interest rates. We didn't do it, right? But that became very visceral and in our face during the convoy when people were mad at the federal government, and they're taking it out on poor schmoes living in an apartment building on Metcalfe Street. What did they have to do with it? They're doing all sorts of different work. So I talk about the convoy explicitly in my chapter on security and the relationship between policing and, civil liberties and this delicate social contract we have, but also about the tension between role of the federal government and Ottawa being a city of 1 million people. So this is one. I'll answer this question a bit more explicitly. Is that a lot of people talk about Ottawa in terms of this town-crown tension? So that there's the city, and then there's the federal government and all the crown jewels. And this goes both ways. So for people living in Ottawa, we get, irritated when we're treated just as the capital, and there's so much more. So this book is really about all the more. But we also have to acknowledge that there are great benefits from living in the capital city, like great in terms of infrastructure for leisure and the national institutions and all of those things as well.
What do you hope changes in how people walk through the city after they read your book?
Well, I hope that some of the people think about some of the key ideas around security and housing. So I talk very critically about gentrification and about corporate landlords that are mass evicting people. So a lot of people, I've just talked to some people recently who didn't know about, for example, the mass evictions in Herongate, which happened just in 2018. So there were the largest mass evictions in Canadian history happened in South Ottawa in this predominantly Black neighborhood, mostly Somali families. And they were evicted so that a corporate landlord could raise the buildings to build more luxury rental housing. And this is all to boost profits for shareholders. So we have a bunch of middle-class Canadians who just have this assets on their investment portfolio. They get little boost on their investments. Meanwhile, hundreds of people have to move and find a more expensive, smaller place much further away. So people forget things really quickly. And I hope when they read this, they can put things together about the relationship between political decisions and people's lived realities. That when you're voting for people that, defer to the interests of landlords all the time, this impacts people's real lives. So I hope they get that maybe from the chapter on housing. I have some really strong critiques, again, drawing on the great work of my colleagues in criminology and sociology, but I have some real strong critiques about policing in Ottawa that I hope people will, if they've not heard it before, they'll think about something new for the first time. For example, in my chapter on night, I talk about the lived realities of street-level sex workers in Ottawa. So this is something people don't think about much when they think about Ottawa and they think about the civil service and the National Gallery. But there are all sorts of people working and living in Ottawa, including sex workers. And this one study, sociology of sex workers, they asked them what their biggest threat was in their day-to-day life. And they overwhelmingly said the police. They detailed things like police taking them out to Orleans in the middle of the night and dropping them off in the middle of, the suburbs when there's no buses running, February, and doing strip searches in front of the grocery stores and all these types of things. So I'm just hope that some of these sociological research will inform how people think about things in different ways. So we just don't take things for granted based on, our previous socialization or news media.
Thank you. I don't have any more questions.
Okay, good. Well, thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to such a wonderful interview. One of the things I love about this show is that it keeps bringing me back to the same idea. Places aren't just backgrounds. They shape us, they hold memory, and they tell stories, even when we're not paying attention. Conversations like this one and books like Ottawology feel like an invitation to slow down and look at the city a little differently, with more curiosity and a bit more care. If you'd like to explore more from the show, you can find the full archive on our website and wherever you get your podcasts. Until next time, this has been The Place of Sound.